The Chinese and their role, what did you make of that, and what did you make of our work on a separate level dealing with trade issues with the Chinese? And we've held off so far on formal tariffs, threatened them, certainly that's still out there. But how do you think this administration is playing that card?
Well, you know, I'd be a lot more comfortable if I thought that the president and President Xi were really having a set of communications with regards to the differences that we have with China. You know, my experience is that it really is worth continuing to have a dialogue with the Chinese. They are important to our economy. They're important in terms of our relationships in the world. They're important to trade. You know, this is not a country that we should just kick them around without making sure that we have a strategy for how we're going to deal with them and how we're going to move forward. I know we've been kicking them around, but I'm not so sure we have a strategy for how we're ultimately going to be able to resolve our differences, and that concerns me.
I don't want to violate any confidences, but I would be curious how you feel, and in talking to either Barack Obama, if you have, or to Bill Clinton, with the constant comparisons this president continues to make as to the progress he's making and the mistakes he's avoiding versus the lack of progress your old bosses had and the problems that they encountered, and that it's a frequent theme of his. I'm getting it done. They didn't.
Well, frankly, I think I'm still waiting for President Trump to get it done. He's torn a lot of things down. He's gotten rid of our position on climate change, on TTP, on tariffs. He's moved to impose tariffs. He's moved to stop the DACA process. But I haven't seen a strategy to actually get things done. He operates by chaos, and I understand that. A certain amount of tactical chaos is good strategy. But strategic chaos can be very dangerous. And right now, I'm still waiting for President Trump to actually deliver on all of the things he's working on to show that he can actually make the deal happen. I haven't seen that yet.
Are you surprised that either Bill Clinton or, for that matter, Barack Obama haven't either taken the bait or and they so far resisted the temptation to comment on the president's comments to their administrations and to what they did or didn't do?
I think that's the smart thing to do, is to frankly ignore those kinds of attacks. They have their record. I think they stand by their record. But it doesn't really serve the purposes of this country in terms of moving forward to have some kind of debate about who was better or who did the right thing or who did the wrong thing. I think the more important thing is to focus on the issues that we're dealing with today and determine whether or not we can move in the right direction today under this president.
Something has changed, though, right?
That is what's important right now.
I'm sorry, but something has changed, right?
Pardon me?
I mean, his poll numbers are up a little bit at this stage in his presidency, higher than where Barack Obama's or Bill Clinton's were at this stage, I should stress. And this blue wave that a lot of Democrats are predicting might not materialize, maybe owing in large part to the economic improvement or the markets, who knows. Do you think your colleagues in the Democratic Party have gotten ahead of themselves? They got too cocky? They are too cocky?
Well, you know, it's always dangerous in politics to assume that somehow victory is inevitable. I think you got to keep working at it, and I'm sure that the candidates that are out there will continue to work at it. Look, there are a lot of question marks here, as I've said, in terms of where we're going. These tariffs that the president's put in place, the relationships with our allies, the fact that they're going to retaliate. All of that could impact on an economy that otherwise is doing pretty well. So there are a lot of people concerned about that. There are a lot of people concerned about what's going to happen with health care. There are a lot of people that are concerned about whether or not we're going to continue to provide leadership in a very troubled world. So there are a lot of issues out there. We'll see how they play out. But the most important thing, frankly, for these candidates is to focus on where they're running, and make sure that they are dealing with the issues that people care about. That's what's important.
But stay humble. My dad used to say, Italian dad, Neil, stay humble. In your case, that it will come in handy. So maybe that's what they all need to do. Leon Panetta, it's always an honor. Thank you very, very much.